Today, we're diving deep into one of ancient Indian philosophy's most unique and, honestly, most pragmatic schools, Pūrva Mīmāṃsā. Now, this isn't your typical philosophy focused on finding God or figuring out the ultimate nature of reality. Nope. It's about something far more immediate, investigating our duty, our dharma, and figuring out how to do it right. So let's just start with a problem that basically every philosophical system has to wrestle with. We're constantly facing choices, right? But what's our ultimate guide? I mean, our senses can deceive us, our emotions are all over the place, and our own logic can be surprisingly flawed. If we can't even fully trust our own perception for everyday things, how on earth are we supposed to use it to know our ultimate duty, our dharma?
And this is the very first critical point the Mīmāṃsā school makes. As the founder Jaimini puts it in his sutras, sense perception only tells us about what's happening right now. But dharma? Well, dharma isn't about the present. It's about an action you do now to get a result in the future, maybe even in a whole other life. Your eyes just can't see the future merit of a good deed. So Mīmāṃsā argues that perception is simply the wrong tool for the job.
Okay, so if our own senses and our minds are out, where do we turn? Mīmāṃsā offers a really radical and fascinating solution, a perfect blueprint for right action that's external, eternal, and flawless. Here it is, the core definition. In the world of Mīmāṃsā, dharma isn't some subjective feeling or a logical calculation. It is simply that which is laid out in the sacred texts, the Vedas, as the path to the highest good. And get this, the Vedas aren't just a source of information about dharma. For Mīmāṃsā, they are the only source, period. This is where Mīmāṃsā's view gets truly wild. They argue the Vedas aren't like any other book you've ever read. A normal text is written by a person, right? It's a product of its time, it reflects their biases, and it's inherently fallible. The Mīmāṃsā school says the Vedas are the complete opposite. They are aparusheya, which means uncreated and authorless. They weren't written by God or a person, they just are. An eternal, self-existing reality that ancient seers simply perceived and passed down. You might be asking, how is that even possible? Well, the answer is in their theory of language. This quote is key. Mīmāṃsā argues that the connection between a word, let's say cow, and the actual concept of a cow isn't some human invention. It's an eternal, inborn relationship. That link is just part of the fabric of the cosmos. And if that's true, then the words of the Vedas are an eternal, infallible guide to reality and our duty within it. So let's put it all together. For Mīmāṃsā, the Vedas are not just some holy scriptures. They're the operating manual for the entire cosmic system of dharma. They are eternal, they have no author whose mistakes we need to worry about, and they are the only reliable way to know our duty. Okay, so we've got an infallible guide, but how does it actually work? How does performing a ritual today lead to a reward, like going to heaven, way off in the future? This is where Mīmāṃsā introduces something you could almost call a kind of moral physics. You see, the Mīmāṃsā philosophers were super practical. They saw a problem. An action, like a sacrifice, is temporary. It ends. But the result, heaven, is far away. So how do you connect those two things across a huge gap in time? Their solution is this brilliant concept, a pūrva. It's an unseen, latent force that gets generated when you correctly perform a ritual. You can think of it like a cosmic IOU or a moral credit that gets created and stored, just waiting to be cashed in. So you can really see how this chain of events works. First, you perform an act exactly like the Veda tells you to. That action is temporary, sure, but it leaves behind this invisible potency, this apurva, and that potency stays linked to you. And it's what guarantees that the promised reward of that action gets delivered at exactly the right time in the future. It perfectly bridges the gap between cause and effect. Now, to support this whole system, Mīmāṃsā also had to develop a pretty unique theory of knowledge. In most Western philosophy, right, the burden of proof is on you to show that something is true. While Mīmāṃsā completely flips the script. Their theory, svata pramanya, says that all knowledge is assumed to be true just by its very nature. It's basically innocent until proven guilty. Falsity is the exception, something that has to be proven by some later conflicting information. So the school identifies 6 valid ways of gaining knowledge, what they call pramanas. The first 4 are pretty standard in Indian philosophy. You've got perception, inference, comparison, and testimony. And of course, for them, Vedic testimony is the highest. But Mīmāṃsā adds 2 more that are absolutely crucial for its system, postulation, which we're going to look at, and non-apprehension, which is just how we know something isn't there, like looking and seeing there's no jar on the table.
Well, let's really zoom in on arthapati, or postulation. This is a powerful form of reasoning that we use all the time. Mīmāṃsā just gives it a formal name. It's the process of assuming an unseen fact just to make sense of what you're seeing. Essentially, it's about filling in the blanks when you're faced with what seems like a contradiction.
And the classic example makes this perfectly clear. Let's say you know for a fact that your friend Devadatta is alive. You also look and see that he is not in his house. Now, those two facts seem to contradict each other, right? They don't make sense together. Unless you postulate a third unseen fact. He must be somewhere outside. That postulation is a valid way of knowing, and honestly, it's how we navigate a huge part of our daily lives.
Okay, so now we have all the pieces on the board: an eternal blueprint in the Vedas, a self-regulating causal mechanism called a Pūrva, and a whole theory of knowledge to back it all up. And this leads to the most startling, the most radical conclusion of the entire Mīmāṃsā system. Because what role is even left for a supreme being?
Now, this is crucial. Early Mīmāṃsā isn't strictly atheist. Jaimini doesn't waste a single line of text trying to disprove God's existence. He simply finds God to be, well, unnecessary for his system. Think about it. If the Vedas are eternal and authorless, you don't need a divine author. If the law of Apurva automatically guarantees the results of actions, you don't need a divine judge to hand out rewards and punishments. The system of Dharma is totally self-sufficient.
But then later thinkers in the school, like the absolutely formidable Kumarila Bhatta in the 7th century, went even further. They didn't just ignore God, they actively argued against the logical necessity of a creator. And they started by asking this very simple but incredibly profound question: why would a perfect, all-powerful, totally self-sufficient being create anything at all?
This quote from Kumarila's work is a direct challenge. Any action we take is to achieve some goal, but a perfect, ever-contented being, by definition, lacks nothing and has no unfulfilled desires. So for that being to act, especially to do something as massive as creating a universe, would seem completely illogical.
Now, the most common counter-argument both then and now is compassion. Maybe God wasn't acting for his own benefit. Maybe he created the world out of pity for souls to give them a place to exist and find liberation.
And here is Kumarila's knockout rebuttal. He says, look around. If the only motive was pure compassion, why would an all-powerful creator build a world that is so full of pain, suffering, and struggle? A truly compassionate, all-powerful being would surely create a universe of pure, non-stop happiness. For Kumarila, the very existence of suffering just flat-out contradicts the idea of a compassionate creator.
So this all leads to their radical conclusion. The universe doesn't need a divine manager. It functions on an impersonal, self-sustaining moral law. Right actions, dharma, automatically create positive results. Wrong actions, adharma, automatically create negative ones. The cosmos is just a finely tuned moral machine that runs all by itself.
So, what's the lasting impact of this incredibly intricate, godless system of ritual and duty? Let's try and connect these ancient ideas to their broader philosophical significance, to why they still matter. It's also really important to see that the school itself didn't stand still. It evolved over time. The goal for early Mīmāṃsā was pretty straightforward. Do your dharma correctly, and you earn a blissful life in heaven. But later thinkers like Kumarila, probably influenced by other Indian philosophies, adopted a much more profound goal: moksha, or total liberation. This wasn't just a reward anymore. It was the complete end of the cycle of birth and death, a state where the self is completely and permanently free from all pain.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought. Mīmāṃsā presents this robust, detailed system of ethics and duty that is completely independent of any god or divine command. It suggests that the moral order of the universe isn't imposed from on high, but is actually woven into the very fabric of cause and effect. So the question for us to think about is this: can duty exist without a divine commander? And is it possible that the simple, diligent performance of our duties is in itself the very thing that holds our world together?